everybody, Bandit here. Welcome back to the Bandit Flight Simmer channel, and today we're back in the Diamond DA62. We're in Bangkok, Thailand, and we're going to be doing our next leg of our journey in our flight around the world. And today we're going to be heading off to Da Nang in Vietnam, and we're going to do a little excursion just off track a little bit down to area in Cambodia near Siem Reap called Angkor Wat, and we'll do a little flyby there. So I got everything set up, ready to go, and I wanted to take off at a certain time because the goal is to try to hit Angkor Wat at sunrise and do a sunrise fly past of Angkor Wat. So it's local time, it's about 4:50 in the morning here in Bangkok, and we are going to get going. It's about an hour and 10 minutes to Siem Reap. So I got everything set up, loaded in right now, and I'll talk about the flight plan after we take off, but let's get going so we can try to make that timing. Okay, so I'll do a quick pre-takeoff check. We're taking off 19 left here in Bangkok, and so we got our flaps are set for takeoff, our pumps are on, our lights are set, we got 6,000 feet set for departure, trim is set at takeoff, and everything looks good. Altimeter is set, so let's release the parking brake, go full power. And there we go, we got full power now. Temperatures and pressures are looking good. There's 80 knots, rotate. Positive rate, gears up. Under knots, get our flaps up. Trim, just keep the speed at 110. Okay, and takeoff looks good. I'll get our autopilot on. Go flight level change. Set speed 110. We'll engage nav mode, and we're activated on the autopilot, tracking the GPS flight level change at 110 knots. Get our climb power at 95. 94, that's good. And T's and P's are good, and we'll get our post-takeoff check. So gear is up, flaps are up, get our pumps off, and I'll leave the landing light on for now. And initial climb up on the departure out of here is up to 5,000. So we got airborne at 4:53 local time. So that should put us hopefully in the Siem Reap area at around sunrise when we fly by Angkor Wat. Look out the window here. There's just some showers off in the distance, I think. Weather is not too bad as we're departing out of Bangkok here. Just hop outside and have a look. Two international airports in Bangkok. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of this one here, but this is the southern one. There's another international airport up in this area up here. So enormous city. Nice reflections off the clouds. Okay, so I'll just go over our route today. And I'll just bring up the Navigraph chart here just to show you. So we are doing a departure out of Bangkok here. This is the departure. We're heading down to Gomes, and then we're going to take this airway over to Siem Reap, and we're going to fly over the airport, and then we'll descend as low as we can. And Angkor Wat is right up in this area, just off Siem Reap up here, so we're going to fly right by it as we depart from Siem Reap. So, and then we'll just continue up this airway up here, up to Papra, and then we're going to fly the arrival into Da Nang on the coast of Vietnam here. So Should be a good trip. We'll look at some new features of the NXi, talk about some of that. There's not a lot added since the last one, mostly to do with engine stuff, which is not too applicable to the Diamond DA62. And I think they just had a lot of bug fixes in this recent edition here, so it's mostly to do with VNAV. But we will talk about some of the engine stuff as we level off here. And if I go to the map here and range out, you can see our whole route is in here as well. Just have to load the arrival in. You can see some weather. I got the NexRad radar on. There's some weather off to the south, so we should have a good flight today. Be a beautiful sunrise as we hit Siem Reap area there. So we're going to be heading eastbound. So right now the departure that we're flying has us top altitude. You can see 6,000 feet here in our magenta, and we have 6,000 set. So the top altitude, you have to stay at or below 6,000 till waypoint Bravo Sierra 902. So that's what we're going to do. Just center our heading bug here. Just show you where we're heading on the departure here. So there's Bravo Sierra 902, so we have to stay at 6,000 till there. And we got some traffic here just off to our left. Let's see if we can see that traffic. It's 500 feet below us. I think there's a glitch in the sim. Someone mentioned that at nighttime the lighting doesn't show up for the traffic, so I have seen them in the daytime but not at night. Anyway, so we're going to level off at 6,000 here, and I'll set a... It's not a very long trip today, so I'm going to keep 90% to keep the cruise speed up. And then once we get past 902, we'll go to our cruise altitude of 7,000 feet for this leg, for the direction of flight. The transition altitude is 11,000, so we're going to stay on the local barometer setting. So I'll get the landing light off now, and then we will get past 902, then climb up to 7,000. So there's our departure out of Bangkok. Pretty good weather, huge city, and off we go to Cambodia. So I'll check in with you a little further down route, and we'll go over some of the NXi features that have been added since the last update. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, we're back here. We're level at 7,000 feet, and we're just departing the outskirts of Bangkok. And everything looks good. We got our cruise power set, landing lights off, temperatures and pressures are all good. Got a good true airspeed of 182. A little bit of a headwind component here, not too bad though. If we take a look at the nav display, just range out, and we're going to pick up our airway to Siem Reap. Just about an hour away from here. And we got a little bit of weather to the south, so it looks pretty good along our route though. I think we're just below that cloud base right now. You can see off in the distance there's just some higher clouds, so we're looking pretty good. And yeah, so let's talk about the latest update to the G1000 NXi mod by Working Title. So most of the changes have to do with bug fixes and fixing how the VNAV works and stuff like that. So in terms of operations, there's not much difference in using the NXi, and there's no real new features in terms of navigation or anything. The main new feature they added was a engine parameters page, and if you're going to use the latest version of the NXi, make sure you also have the latest and you're using the the mod for the DA62X. Make sure you have the latest update for that as well, because if you don't, then your engine power settings are not going to show up properly. So you need to have the latest DA62X mod as well. Okay, so for the engine page, it's not really applicable to the DA62 because it's more applicable for aircraft that have mixture control settings. The DA62 uses a FADEC, which is a digital fuel control unit, and it senses temperature, pressure, and what power settings you have and everything, and then it basically auto leans the aircraft for you, so you don't have to. It's going to run at the most efficient power settings and for the aircraft based on propeller and mixture and everything like that. So it's basically like a auto mixture control. But for aircraft that do use mixture controls, like the Baron and the Bonanza and the Cessnas, this engine page is much more applicable. Anyway, I'll just go through. They added some uses here for the DA62 as well. So now when you select the engine page, before none of these were available. Now we have a lean and a system page. Well, obviously we have no mixture lean, so the lean page is not going to do a lot for us. It will give us some other information though. So for the mod, they have put on some fuel information here, which is kind of nice to have. So now we can look at our fuel. We got our main fuel, aux fuel, our fuel flow, fuel temperature, and we also have a totalizer fuel, so gallons remaining, gallons used, and it shows our endurance and our range. So nice useful features to have for the fuel. And but the lean page for the other aircraft is totally different. And what I'll do is, in the next update for the NXi, when they add a new feature, I believe it's going to be the missed approaches, I'm going to do a tutorial video on all the features up to that point for the NXi. And what I'll do is I'll do that tutorial in the Beechcraft Baron, just so we can show you how the engine pages work for the aircraft with mixture control settings. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to the channel and sign up for notifications, and then you'll see the tutorial when the latest edition of the G1000 NXi comes out, and you'll see it in the Beechcraft Baron, and it'll be able to cover a lot of these engine features. Anyway, so the mod for the DA62 have included some nice fuel calculations here for us. Our flight today is about just under 500 miles, so we have lots of range for this flight today, so that's why I'm just keeping the power setting, cruise setting a little bit higher. We also have these two pages which don't do anything for us in the DA62, and it's to do with leaning the aircraft. So you can select which cylinder, and you have a lean assist page here that you can use, and they're not going to function in this aircraft. So basically we'll look at that in the next video with when we fly the Baron. And then we have the last system page here, and that just gives us other engine parameters like electrical, some gearbox stuff, and it also shows our de-icer fluid levels. By default, when you load the plane, the de-icer fluid level is going to be at half full. So if you want to fill it up, you need to double the amount of pounds. I think it's default 45 pounds, which is half. So if you want a full amount of de-ice fluid, you have to manually put in 90 pounds yourself. And that's just in the fuel settings here. And when I go down to de-ice fluid, max 90 pounds, the default's 45. You have to add 90 yourself, and you have to do that before you load up the airplane. So, but if you're happy with 45, you can just leave it at default 45. So that's the engine pages as they apply to the DA62. It doesn't do much for us here, but it's some really neat stuff for the aircraft that have mixture controls. And like I said, I'll do my next NXi tutorial video using the Baron, so we can look at those systems a little more closely. Other than that, pretty much everything else on the NXi is pretty much the same. So we will we'll just go over that. We're going to do an arrival and use some VNAV and see how well the VNAV is working when we come into Da Nang. So we got a little ways to cruise here. As we get a little bit closer to Siem Reap, we're going to descend down, get a little bit lower, and then hopefully fly by Ankor Wat for a nice sunrise flyby of Angkor Wat. So I'll see you as we get a little bit closer to Siem Reap. Okay, we're 13 minutes back from Siem Reap. Still at 7,000 feet, cruising along nicely. And you see the sun coming up over Cambodia. So I think we may have timed it pretty good for our arrival up to Angkor Wat there. I was very fortunate to have visited Cambodia on a holiday about 5 or 6 years ago, and had an opportunity to visit Siem Reap and see some of the temples at Angkor Wat. And we're going to fly by the main temple, Angkor Wat, today. There's numerous temples in the area, but Angkor Wat being one of the most famous ones. And I was fortunate enough to be there for a sunrise at Angkor Wat. It was a beautiful, beautiful spot. So hopefully we're going to see what that looks like today. So right now I'm going to, we got the terrain here is not very high, so we're going to descend down to 3,000 feet. So I just request that with ATC, and we'll descend to 3,000, and then we're a lot lower for when we fly over Angkor Wat area. I'll just do that vertical speed, 1,000 feet per minute. And I'll bring the power back a little bit for the descent, keep the speed around the same. And so we'll level off 3,000, we'll overfly Siem Reap Airport, and then outbound from there we should be pretty close to Angkor Wat. And we should have a good view of the temple. Okay, so I'll check in with you as we come up over Siem Reap, and hopefully the sun will just be popping up a little bit more, and we should have a beautiful sunset flyby of Angkor Wat. I'll see you there in a little bit. Okay, so we're just a few minutes back from Angkor Wat, or from Siem Reap here. There's the city of Siem Reap, and you can see on the map here you have these water features. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more. And these are man-made water features. They have all these man-made canals and lakes, and Angkor Wat, I believe, is right in this area right here. So we're going to depart on this airway. We're going to have a nice view of it as we go by. So I'm going to request to descend from ATC to 1,500 feet, so we can be nice and low when we fly by, and so we'll do that now. I'll just update our altimeter, and we'll put in 1,500 feet, and we'll vertical speed it down. And as we fly by on our departure way out of Siem Reap, we should get a great view of the airport. So you see these man-made water features all over the place. There's actually Angkor Wat right there. So we should get a great view as we fly by it. They have various temples throughout the area here. They're famous for their some of the temples that haven't been restored. Angkor Wat has actually been restored quite a bit, but some of the temples are quite overgrown with large trees, and they're very famous pictures of some of the temples in the jungle. Anyway, so we should have a great view as we fly by here. Just get down as low as we can. Bring the power back a bit so we're not going too fast. And if you ever get a chance to come to this area, the temples are very close to Siem Reap, so stay in the Siem Reap area, and then it's like a very short drive up to Angkor Wat. And but there's temples scattered all throughout this area of Cambodia. So we're just coming up to 1,500 feet. Keep the power back at about 50%, so keep the speed back. Beautiful sunrise. It's one of the best times to see Angkor Wat. So as we come up to the temple, what I'll do is I'll record an outside view, and then we can get an outside view flying by the temple here. Still getting those janky tearings in the screen here. Okay, so I think we're going to fly right by the temple to the right. So there's Angkor Wat right there, surrounded by this moat almost like. Beautiful sunrise. I'll disengage the autopilot. We'll just do a little turn here. There's the temple right there. So we'll get back on track. Now I'll re-engage the autopilot. Look like it wants to re-engage. Anyway, I'll show a little flyby from the outside here, and then we'll get back up on our track. The autopilot will not re-engage. Sometimes you have to shut off the avionics for some reason to re-engage the autopilot, but not sure why. Okay, so I'll start a climb up to 7,000 feet again. A little flight level change. Speed back. And we are on nav, so bring the power up. We've got a climb back going here. And I'll see if I can get the autopilot re-engaged. Okay, so we're back at our cruise altitude. I climbed up to 13,000 feet. I'll just go over the route here. So we just parted Siem Reap, and this airway was 6,000 feet, but once we make the turn on this airway up to Papua here, it's 13,000 feet. We've got some higher terrain as we come into Da Nang, and so we leveled off at our 13,000 foot altitude, or flight level 130. Transition level is 10,000 feet, so we're standard barrel now. And yeah, so all looks good. We got our cruise power set 90%, and got a good true airspeed. A little bit of crosswind here, so not too bad. We got a little bit of weather as we come up to Vietnam here, so we'll have a look at that. And we're ready to transfer our fuel. So if I go to the engine setting here, we can look at our page, which says our fuel. So we got 56 gallons remaining. Ox tanks are still full. We can start transferring that over. So, and we have a lot of range left, 600 miles, if we stay at this cruise power setting here. We're about halfway, so we should have lots of gas when we get to Da Nang. And so what I'll do now is I'll start our fuel transfers. So fuel pumps are on, and we've got our left pump, aux pump on, right aux pump on, so that's all set. So as we get a little closer, we've got to skirt by this weather here. As we get a little closer to Papua, I'll start setting up for our arrival into Da Nang, and we'll get a good chance to try the VNAV again and transition to an approach. So, right now the weather looks pretty good. See some weather off in the distance there. And hopefully it's not going to be too much more than what we see on the radar. And we'll deal with that as we do our approach into Da Nang. So I'll see you in a little bit. Oh, for the autopilot too. I couldn't re-engage the autopilot. I had to hand fly for quite a while initially while I was troubleshooting that. And so, as it turns out, I have my autopilot disconnect button linked to a button on my joystick. And so when I press that button, disconnect the autopilot so I can make that turn as we were just flying by Siem Reap there or by Angkor Wat. But then when I try to re-engage the autopilot, it wouldn't allow me to re-engage it. And so I tried, I've had that in the past, and I shut off the avionics master, electric master, and then reset those, and sometimes that would fix the problem, but it still wasn't coming on. So as it turns out, I had to hit that autopilot disconnect button again so that it would allow me to re-engage it. So that's in the end what I was able to do, just hit that autopilot disconnect button a second time, and then I was able to re-engage the autopilot. So anyway, crisis averted. We're back. Autopilot's re-engaged. GPS altitude at flight level 130 and cruising to Da Nang. So anyway, that was the problem. If you have that button map for autopilot disconnect, if you ever need to reconnect your autopilot again, you're going to have to hit it again before you try to re-engage the autopilot. Okay, so I'll see you as we get a little closer to Da Nang, and we'll set up for our arrival and our approach. Okay, so we're just coming up to initial fix. Papra here. Got our aux fuel is transferred, so both pumps are empty. So we'll turn off those aux pumps. They're off. We'll check our fuel. We got 22 gallons aside. We can go look at our fuel total here. So 21 gallons aside, and we got range of endurance of 2.5 hours and 440 miles. So lots of fuel left. And what we'll need to do now is load up our arrival into Da Nang. And I'll just go over that real quick here. So we're going to plan the Manga 1 Bravo. And we come in over Papra here, and then we follow this route Manga along here through this route here, and we end up at Farah, which is the initial fix for the ILS, and then we're going to transition to the ILS 3-5 right. Right now the weather shows just some broken cloud, winds out of the light winds out of the north. You see some rain showers moving in here. Luckily we're above all this weather here, so it's just rain below us. So you can see we're well above the cloud here, so the weather worked out pretty good. And then looks pretty clear on our descent into Da Nang. So let's get that arrival and approach loaded up. So I'll go to the procedures page. We'll select the arrival first. And we're going to be doing there's quite a few here. Manga 1 Bravo is going to be the one we're going to be doing. And we're coming in via Manga. And we'll enter that. And so it's that looks good, and should finish up at Fire and runway 35 right, so we'll hold that. So that looks good. So that's in there, and what we'll need to do now is load up the ILS too. So we'll select the approach, and this transitions to the ILS Whiskey 35 right. That's via Fira there. That's good. Put our minimums in, and it is 292 feet, so I'll just make it 290. And we can load that. And they have this warning. This is a standard NXi thing now. Not approved for GPS. GPS guidance is for monitoring only, so that's because we're doing an ILS approach, so we'll just accept that warning. And then we have that loaded in. So now we can go through the flight plan, and we can kind of just look through these. So we have all our altitudes associated with the arrival. So we'll use VNAV, and we should be able to follow all these altitudes associated with the arrival. And then it's fair at 2,600 feet is where we're going to start the approach. So if I bring up the RNAV arrival here, you can see all these arrivals: Manga 9,030 feet, and then our next altitude is going to be Vidin at 7,060 feet. So they're all coded in here correctly, and we're going to be following that route all the way around to here. So if we engage VNAV, we should be able to meet the at or aboves at all these altitudes all the way in. So we'll see how that works on today's arrival. So when we start the arrival, I'll set the final altitude of 2,600 feet, and then we should sequence every VNAV altitude on the way in. So we'll see how that works out. So that looks good. So we have that loaded. We should have a top of descent, and top of descent point is right there, so that looks good. And so yeah, so we have our approach loaded, ready to go. And what I'll do is I'll just brief the approach, and then I'll check in with you again at the top of descent, and we'll follow it in. So we are doing this arrival. It's the Manga 1 Bravo, and we're going from Papra to Manga, and we're going to be following this route from Manga to Vidin to Doten, Traco, Cadiz, Monterey, and Tamla, and Farah, and we're going to follow all these altitude restrictions. They're all coded in there. And so, like I said, I'll set VNAV. I'll set 2,600 feet when we hit the top of descent, and I'll engage VNAV, and then we should meet all these restrictions all the way in. There, it should automatically transition to the ILS, and the frequency will brief the ILS approach. So it is frequency 111.5, and if that's already set in the, when I loaded the approach, it's already set in both NAV1 and NAV2, so that's ready to go. And course 353 should automatically load it. We'll cross the FAF at 1,969 feet down to decision altitude of 292 feet for our case, and the runway elevation is 29 feet, so that's 263 feet above runway elevation. The visibility required for this approach is like it's with the lights on, it's 1,200 meters, or full lights on, it's 1,000 meters, so shouldn't be an issue. And in the venomous approach, it is maintain runway heading, climb to 6,730 feet, passing 990 feet, intercept the VOR 001 radial to Delta Alpha November VOR, and then at 2960 or above, turn right to direct to the Da Nang VOR. So anyway, we'll try to follow that as closely as possible if we have to do that. And what I'll do is I'll put the Da Nang VOR as a backup into the NAV2 if we need it. And yeah, so there's our minimum safe altitude coming in from the south. Well, we follow the arrival. We're going to be good for the altitudes, but if we need it, it's 5,300 feet coming in from the south there. Okay, so that's our approach loaded and ready to go. So I'll check in with you at the top of descent, and we'll start the procedure. See you in a few minutes. Okay, we're just coming up to our top of descent point. And you can see in the magenta our first altitude restriction is 9,030 feet. And I'm going to set the final altitude in the arrival, which is 2,600 feet for our altitude selector. And then I'll engage VNAV, and we should be able to follow this arrival in VNAV. So now we've got that selected, I'll select VNAV, and you see VNAV path is armed. And we should see, as we get close to our top of descent here, we should transition to VNAV. and meet those altitude restrictions all the way in. So hopefully that'll be the case. A little bit bumpy here. Okay, so you can see now our VNAV has just come active, and we're gonna watch the VNAV cursor come down, and then they target descent rate for keeping that path to meet those altitude restrictions. So our first restriction is at Manga at 9,030 feet, so we'll just monitor how that goes. So you can see our path starting to come in. As we hit it, it should transition from VPath being armed to VPath being active. And then it should target the just around 1,000 foot per minute descent here. And then we'll just reduce our power a little bit to keep our speed. I'll try to keep about 160 knots in the descent. So there our VPath is active. Starting the descent. I'll bring the power back. And I'll try to keep close to 160 as possible. So descent rate, we'll check what our transition altitude is here. And transition altitude is 9,000 feet, so we'll get our altimeter set as we go past Mangi at 9,000 feet. So I'll check in with you at the first crossing altitude and we'll see how things are going. Just bring back the power a little bit. So I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so we're through 9,500 feet. I'm going to set through the transition altitude, so we'll set the barrel. We'll take it out a standard barrel. The options, and just get rid of standard barrel, 29. So that put us down below the 9,000 feet, so we just level off there. So we'll transition to VAlt. Bring up some power as we level off here, and so we're crossing Manga at 9,030 feet, and then it should go to our next altitude of 7,060 feet is our next. So VPath is armed, and we got a new top of descent that'll get us down to our next altitude there. So just bring the power back up so we can keep our speed up since we're level here, and yeah, so that first altitude restriction worked out okay. Now, ideally, the way this is doing VNAV is it's taking the altitude, so it had to be 9,030 feet or above, and I don't know what happened there. A little pressure problem there. Pop off for a second, but keep an eye on the engine instruments. Temperatures and pressures all look good. Okay, so I've got my power set too high, bring it back to 90, okay, and so basically what it's doing is it's targeting that altitude to be at that altitude, but those are at or above altitude, so that's one of the problems with VNAV in the NXi is ideally you would want to fly continuous descent all the way in, and so maybe a 500 foot per minute rate of descent would have been more suitable to keep going, to keep that descent going to meet that final altitude. And all you really are required to do is be at or above all these altitudes all the way in. So right now it targets to be at that altitude. So we kind of hit that altitude at 9,030 feet, and then we're going to level off, and then we're going to start a descent at 1,000 feet per minute and hit this altitude at 7,060 feet. And then we're going to do the same thing. We'll probably level off and then hit this altitude at 6,070 feet. A better way to do it is, because these are at or above altitudes, would be to probably have a slower descent, like 500 feet per minute, and just maintain that as much as possible all the way in, a continuous descent. And as long as you meet these restrictions, then you should be fine. So VNAV isn't quite perfect yet in this airplane. If you do that in the, I think in the CJ4 when I use VNAV, it will it will just fly a continuous descent, and as long as you maintain those at or above altitudes or at or below altitudes, then that's fine. So hopefully they can implement that with the NXi here shortly. So we're coming back up to the top of the descent. You can see now it's captured the path again, and we're going to go down to that 760. So anyway, I think it's going to be following that all the way in, so that shouldn't be a problem. We're going to meet all the restrictions. It's just not a very effective way to shoot the approach, but it works. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll check in with you as we get a little further along, as we get closer to final here, and then we'll make that transition onto the ILS. So I'll bring the power back a little bit here, just keep the speed back closer to 160. Okay, so I'll check in with you as we make our turn on the final here. Okay, we're still on the arrival here, and it's still doing that, basically what I call a dive and drive. So it dives down to the next altitude and then levels off and then continues down. But it is following the VNAV profile. It's met all the restriction altitudes. So next one is at 4930 for Monterey here, and we're going to meet that. So it's going to meet that restriction right there. So anyway, coming in, we're going to transition to the ILS here momentarily. So that's at the FAF at FERA. And so I'll activate the ILS or activate the approach for that, and then we'll transition onto the ILS. Just getting below the cloud here, there is a little bit of low visibility. Should see the airport popping up here momentarily off in the distance. Should easily be able to get in on the ILS. So I'm going to put in nav 2, I'm going to put the Nang VOR for the missed approach, so we have that if we need it, because there is no missed approach waypoint set up in the NXi at this point. So the frequency for that is 114.4, so I'll do that on nav 2, sorry. So 1144, and there we go, and there's the Da Nang VOR, so that's set if we need to use it. And I just put a needle on that as an option too, so I'll put variant 2 needle on that in case we need it. Okay, so next altitude restriction is at Tamla, and that's 4270. So the path is starting to come back in, so we'll continue our descent, and then we're going to hit the initial fix here at Fire, and that will be where we transition to the ILS. So after we pass Tamla, I'm going to arm the approach, and then we should transition on to the ILS from there. You can see the runway, parallel runways, 35 right we're going to be landing on, there's 35 left. There's a beautiful coast of Vietnam. I think for our next flight we'll just do hopefully we can have good weather and we can do a visual coastal run up the coast of Vietnam, and beautiful islands and beautiful scenery. So hopefully that'll be the plan. If not, then we'll have to go IFR. That should hopefully take us up to somewhere near Hong Kong, I think, for the next leg. So I'll bring the power back a little bit, and we're just coming up on Tamla here. Looks good. We're going to meet that crossing altitude of 4270. There we go, and now we're on our next leg into Farah, and that's 2600. So just keep following the path. I'm just bring the power back a little bit more, get the speed back a little bit so we can start thinking about configuring. And now I'm going to arm the approach. And now you see the localizer is armed and the glide slope is armed. And we have 11.5 IDR is set for the ILS, so that should make that automatic switch when we hit Farah there. So got our landing light on, throw our pumps on, and we'll bring the power back, start getting below our flap speed of 136. So the NXi does a great job of the VNAV. It's just not a continuous descent profile, which is fine. But it's going to make sure that you meet all your altitude restrictions on the way in. And it should make the automatic transition to the ILS here. So we'll try to bring the speed back. Okay, we'll get our gear down. We're going to capture that 2,600 feet and level off there, and there we go. Localizer is captured, and we just have the glide slope coming in, so looks good. Speed's coming back. We'll put in our approach flap now, and then I'll shoot for about 110 knots for final approach speed. So we've got a little bit of a crosswind here. Speed's good. So we got gear down, approach flap set, landing lights on, boost pumps are on. And now we have the glide path, glide slopes arm, should capture here as soon as we hit it. Just watch the speed. There we go. And I'll bring the power back for maintaining about 110 knots. Got a pretty good crosswind here. So the missed approach is climb to 6,730 feet. Well, we can't put that in, so we'll put in 6,700 feet. I've ever seen a missed approach that specific, but anyway. Speed's a little hot. Gonna bring back some power. Just double check my altimeter is correct. 2959. Carry a little bit extra speed because of the winds. Still, I want to get back for that 110, so power back. Scenery here in Da Nang. The approach is looking good. Speed's coming back nicely. We'll assume we have our landing clearance, and we'll just clear off to the right of the first available taxiway. Still have landing flap to go. Going up to minimums. Select the land flap now. Speed is good. And we'll let the speed taper off to about 90 knots. Wind's tapered off a little bit now, so it's only 7 knots. Still a crosswind though. So speed looks good. I'll disengage the autopilot. Just visually flying the last portion of the approach here. Touchdown. There we go. Welcome to Da Nang. It was a great flight today. Beautiful scenery coming into Vietnam here. Beautiful fly past of Angkor Wat. Got to try out the NXi bit and see some of the new features. So I hope you enjoyed today's trip. Thanks for joining me. I think our next trip we'll just hopefully do a VFR leg up the coast of Vietnam. And if the weather is suitable, if not, then we'll just do an IFR leg. So if you enjoyed today's content, make sure you subscribe to the channel and sign up for notifications so you'll see the next trip in our Around the World series in the DA62. Pleasure having you join me for today's flight, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming out, and band it out.